Well, good morning, everybody. Our first map here looks at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. And what we've essentially watched is the low that was just off the coast of California for all of last week. It's basically moved its position here into the Midwest. Last night we did see some pretty nasty storms down in the southern and lower Mississippi River Valley here, with some of the storms producing some pretty large hail. Plus we saw some strong wind gusts and I think 5 reports of tornadoes. So it was a pretty rough night down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. But on the flip side of this, look at this rain. I mean, arguably, this is the driest spot in the country compared to average. And so to be able to get some rain into that area has been absolutely critical. Now, we were concerned about a little bit of snow on the northern side of this, but if I look back over the last 3 days through 6 o'clock last night, we didn't see any reports of any snow accumulation on the northern side of this. But you can see that we did add some snow amounts to the Intermountain West, the Rockies, the Cascades, and the Sierra Nevada. So it's good to see some snowpack building up there. But we've got a long ways to go in this winter to see the snowpack continue to recover. So this morning, where's the system located? Well, it's pushing through the Ohio River Valley, the main frontal boundary stretching down here, cutting right across New Orleans early this morning. We're going to be pushing some of this rain better into the southeast, which is a place that desperately needs to be getting more of this precipitation. So we're going to watch where that's going to go. There is the risk of some stronger storms down here, including some strong winds. We talked about this a lot this week. We're going to keep an eye out again today. Right here along kind of the spine of the Appalachian Mountains for some very strong winds. We do have winter weather advisories north here into New England and a couple of spots in the mountains, and then got to come back to the Rockies to see the other area where there's a winter storm watch that's been placed in parts of Wyoming. This will be for Thanksgiving, and we have winter weather advisories behind it. Still some strong winds in Southern California, and you can see here the fog that is in parts of Oregon and Northern California. All right, today's severe thunderstorm risk did expand a bit. We're just going to watch this morning as the storms roll through here, but then we'll keep an eye out throughout much of the southeast for the rest of the day today for some of these stronger storms to roll through. And to see kind of the timing of all of this, let's just go have a look at the high-resolution NAM. So starting at 7 a.m. Central Time, playing this through midday today, getting into this evening, and then into the overnight hours. There's a long, thin band of storms that'll ride along that frontal boundary as snow begins to push into parts of New England, Ontario, and Quebec. We're going to keep an eye on that system and its potential for some pretty heavy snow here in parts of maybe parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and then getting into Maine as well. But it's great to see this rain moving into the east, one of our drier areas, as we talked about yesterday. We'll just watch that frontal boundary kind of slide on offshore by the time we get into about midday tomorrow on Wednesday. At that point, we're going to watch a pretty weak system, but it's something to talk about here that's sliding through parts of Montana and into Idaho. And what this is kind of riding the edge of is actually this high-pressure cell that's here. And this is the high pressure that's going to be dropping in some pretty chilly air after Wednesday into this section of the country. So we're going to see that snow staying pretty far to the west as we play it out here to early in the morning on Thursday. This will be Thanksgiving, so you'll wake up to some white stuff in this area of the country here. Okay, some of the bigger picture things we're going to talk about and that we're following here. We're going to start off with the week 1 forecast of precipitation. And most of what you see on this map is what I just described. One system leaving. We have the little system that's sneaking through here, going to be bringing in some snow. And outside of that, the pattern just kind of fell apart. I mean, it just doesn't have the momentum to carry across the country to continue to deliver another system here as we work through this week. So, this has been a pretty sizable forecast bust. We've been talking about it now for a couple of weeks here. And for late November, we were expecting a bit more activity than what you've got here. I do think there's something that's trying to shake up the pattern. I want to cover it here when I get to these last few tabs over here in a few moments. But the bigger stories are these. This is your 10-day forecast of precipitation anomalies from this morning's ECMWF run. So yesterday we mentioned, hey, the Pacific jet just can't extend far enough, which is going to leave this area pretty dry over the next 10 days. With flow kind of coming in split, like coming over the top like this with the subtropical jet on the south. That's a lot of convergent flow in this area, giving us drier conditions right back on top of most of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio basin. So again, we don't expect the Mississippi River to recover anymore because of this. And then this is the wrong pattern to send big storm systems up the East Coast as well. So we're really missing it with this one. A couple other places to talk about. South America. Okay, we had the rain that moved north. I'll show you that on satellite in just a few minutes. But the new forecast, as we talked about last week, we saw that it was trying to drop in drier conditions following it. We're going to provide an explanation for that. and we've gone right back over to the very, very wet conditions here in southern Brazil. This would be desperately needed rainfall in this pocket of Argentina, including like Santa Fe over toward Cordoba and then down into Buenos Aires as well. And this is an area that we continue to need to monitor for drought recovery. And the last kind of place I want to talk about here, also in the southern hemisphere, is Australia. If you look over the next 10 days for them, very wet conditions from the Northern Territory into Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, even down into Tasmania, very wet conditions. And this is all about, I think, the progression of the MJO. And that's what we're going to make a case for at the end of this forecast video. All right, coming back to North America, I think the area that I'm watching most carefully is right in through here. I think this is kind of our setup man right here. So we've kind of watched this pattern getting very, I guess I would say, poorly predicted by the models. Remember last week we had the botched forecast with the big omega block over Alaska. This week we've now seen the jet stop kind of pushing its way across the Pacific, and I'm keeping an eye right here for troughs to develop. Now watch. As I play through Wednesday into Thursday, what do we continue to see here? We continue to see lower pressure forming in this area being reinforced by lower pressure behind it. So if you can just imagine, if you're going to drop the pressure here, you're going to make it rise in this area, and then it'll drop over here again. So can you see that, those arrows? Watch the pattern. I'm going to take the arrows off, because starting this weekend, going into next week, that's what we see, right? So you saw the pressure and the heights drop here, rose here, and drop there. And that seems to be the mainstay of this pattern to finish this month of November. And I think the models have finally latched onto it and are not letting it go. Big question we have is, does it last into December? It's certainly there through about December 3rd and 4th, but there's questions as to whether or not this trough, which we just mentioned here, is a bit more progressive and wants to dive farther into the West Coast. We need to see if there's any supporting evidence for that, and if it does, it changes the whole pattern for the rest of the United States getting into December. Now, the GFS is a little different from the European. The GFS right now in the ensemble wants to really drop it in there. See that? And to be honest with you, I know I'm not supposed to root for models, but man, I'd love to see this, because this would start to pick up the flow in the west, increase the precipitation in the west, send systems over the mountains, and break us away from flow that's coming into the central part of the United States in this direction. We don't like that. There's only one time of year where I like northwest flow, and that is if it is July or August, because that brings in thunderstorms. If you are any other time of year, this is convergent flow. And convergence in the upper levels of the atmosphere causes you get mass convergence. That's what the term convergence is, just mass convergence. Therefore, the pressure builds. You get high pressure, sinking air, clear skies, drier conditions. And we have a drought going in this area. We don't need this. So the GFS brings in a little hint of change. And so we're going to go out there and look at it, but it's not out there until, December 4th and 5th. So I want to compare the models just to show them to you, and then I'm going to just dive into the European because I think the solutions are pretty close to one another. So we've already watched this system move into New England. We'll take a look at those snowfall totals in a second. And then after that, it's just the system rolling through the mountains here, bringing some snow, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and then into the plains. Now, I'll give you the latest snowfall totals in a moment. The European model is a bit more aggressive on where that snow is going to be. You can see the tail end of a lingering front still bringing quite a bit of wet weather, possibly into Florida here late this week on Friday. But we're going to see that system just slowly move its way across the middle part of the country. Now, I'll be watching to see if this changes in its strength at all. Maybe by Saturday into Sunday, it's got a little bit more curves to the flow, and it might spin up a deeper low, but as it stands, it's going to have plenty of colder air to work with, so we might see some snowflakes in this region. It's in both models. This is out there early Sunday morning, and then that low curls up into New England as well. Some lake effect snow out of this is possible, especially given how warm the lakes are and the cold air that's going to be coming in behind this. And I will be watching for another round of rain on the frontal boundary next Monday that'll sneak through parts of the southeast and over the Appalachian Mountains. But that's through Monday, and then Tuesday that tries to curl up. There's some snow with it. The models kind of split a bit after this. Notice that the high pressure builds into this part of Canada by next Tuesday, but the ECMWF has a low there, so already some kind of, inconsistency in the models. But what I see is I just don't see them tossing anything big into the west through the next 10 days, and that's one of the things I'm on the lookout for. So I'm just going to show you one model, just get a nice big view of what's going on here. So this is the rain that's getting added now, desperately needed in this area. Watch the system sneak in behind it. There it is. Most of that is snow. And then I just keep playing this out, and you don't see a whole lot getting added, do you? I mean, there's something in the Gulf, but overall, from day 5 to day 10, there's not a whole lot of additional precip getting added in this area. Let's go look in the southeast, because this is one of our areas that is really struggling with drought. The European model is pretty generous with the rainfall through the next 5 days, so I'd love to see it. I'd love to get every inch of this. Interestingly enough, the GFS is wetter right in through here. So it's a little bit farther to the east with the progression of the system. That's why it's wetter in that area. I'm just showing you the European model, a solution at this point. Then remember, there is the second pulse of moisture coming into the Gulf. Yesterday's runs had this a bit farther to the north over the Gulf Coast, so that trended a bit south. So take a look at it. That's your southeast precipitation totals. On the snow side of it, here's kind of the snow spreading in. And I'm going to take you out there about a week in it, but I want to show you a couple of individual regions, like parts of New England. So here's the potential for some snow today. Likely this is overdone because we're going to use a 10-to-1 ratio on this, and we're going to be pretty close to the freezing point. So these snowfall amounts, this may be a bit more slushy of a snow than, and therefore compacting a whole lot more than what the model is going to show. But some snow coming into New England, as you can see. And remember, there's that second push. Look at this. This is Sunday into Monday. That could add a little bit more into that area as well. All right, let's now go have a look at the snow that's coming into the central U.S. There it is. And we're going to take this all the way out there through Monday and Tuesday. So remember, we could see on the back side of this over the weekend, maybe first snowflakes flying in a few areas here. But we've seen the European model kind of bring the snow out of the mountains, stretching a good area in through here that maybe could pick up 3 to 6 inches of total accumulation. All right, that's what we've got in this region. But the bigger picture is, when you look over the next 10 days, everywhere that you've seen this deepest red has a 90 to 100% chance of seeing less than half of an inch. And this is from the 0Z run, meaning that this has now crept further into this area once you get rid of the rain that was going in this area overnight. So that's a lot of dry air. And the wetter side of it's mainly confined here. Whoops, we got a new model run. Let's go back and give you that 0Z run, because the 6Z isn't fully in, and the 6Z in the European only goes out like 144 hours. So you can see the best chances of the wettest conditions. But look at the west. I mean, this is not what we want to see. We've got to get the Pacific Jet engaged. That's, again, why I'm rooting for the GFS solution out there, day 15. Got to get that trough to dive in to the Gulf of Alaska, pull toward the west coast to bring in that moisture into this region. Okay, what about week 2? Well, because the GFS is the only model trying to drop that trough and see the wetter conditions showing up here, that's what we need to be on the lookout for, because the European was still drier. The CPC was drier. They're all three dry in this area, or drier, excuse me, in this area due to the convergent flow. That's the flow out of the northwest that's hitting that particular region. Okay, quick temperature discussion. We watched the temperature frost line just kind of meander a bit farther to the south in some of the recent runs from the last 24 hours. And also, I want to point out that we're going to be getting some pretty chilly temperatures in the Central Valley of California, maybe dropping down here to like 35, 34, 33 degrees over the next week. So watch your local temperature forecast carefully in the Central Valley of California, okay, for these frosty temperatures. The temperature fluctuation, let's get here, is going to be pretty wild. By the way, I just left this up on accident. This is just where I go to pull this stuff. You should know that you could go to agweather.com and see highs, lows, 7-day forecast of GDDs, all of the models, highs and lows, every 6 hours. I have it's all here. You can go play around with it. I just choose to show you certain things to try to keep these videos under a half hour, because as you know, I could talk endlessly about this stuff. So let's get back into it here. Temperatures today. Look at this warm up in the plains. That is going to last for about a day. Wednesday's highs, maybe if you could celebrate Thanksgiving a day early, do it, because this is going to be amazing, because what follows it is a 30-degree drop in temperature. Still quite cool across the south compared to normal. This is Thanksgiving's days. Temperatures much more moderated over what we thought about a week ago. Still chilly, but the coldest air plows into right through this part of the high plains on Friday into Saturday and Sunday. And it's interesting to think. Here we are, on the 26th. So a high in the mid-30s in the Red River Valley here. That's in the 20s actually, but down here into like Sioux Falls, that's a little bit warmer than average. That's where we are in this time of year. So a lot of cooler air diving in here. Now watch this though. I'm sorry, let's take you back to day 0 through 5, out to day 5 through 10, the cold air comes down, and then the model just loses it. Like it doesn't quite fully see the evolution of this pattern. And all this warmth building in here, big questions as to whether that could be there, or is this farther to the east and the solution is more progressive with a deeper low here. That's what I'll be watching for. That's way out there. That's the first 5 days or 6 days of December, but that's what we're going to keep an eye on. Now, a couple of things to just take note of. Here's the catalyst for change. The MJO coming out of the phase 1, moving into the Indian Ocean, phase 3 and phase 4. Now, what we're all going to be asking ourselves, all of us meteorologists, is do we end up getting a nice little lagged progression of the pattern due to the MJO sweeping into this area? I will make a comment about this. This is very fast. It normally takes about 6 weeks for the MJO to go all the way around and come back around. If it's just normally progressing, 4 to 6 weeks. It's going to go here in 2. Like that's halfway around. So that's a really fast, we are expecting this to be kind of coupled with some convective wave, like a Kelvin wave moving across. And I think that's why it's moving so very quickly here. But I'll show you this. If it does, and we get that reaction in December to it, MJO phase 4 produces a ridge east, and look, a trough closer to the west. Okay? That's MJO phase 4. MJO phase 3, let's say we get stuck there. There's still a ridge in this area, and the trough tries to come out of the Gulf of Alaska, and there's even a subtropical piece to this. Now, you're saying, well, what does all this mean? This means we flip the pattern. The cold that we've got here, remember we drawn these arrows for you earlier? It was doing something like this. Okay, this all shifts in this direction, and we move that ridge over, and the whole pattern flips on its head. And that's what I think the CPC saw. This was their 1-month outlook, and I think that's what they were going after here. What's interesting is, right now, this is all riding over the top. Excuse me. I apologize. I'm battling a cold, and I think I'm on the tail end of it, but hopefully we'll be done with it by tomorrow. But what you've got here is the current state of the El Nino. And that El Nino at this point has got ocean temperatures that just bumped up. Take a look here to 1.69 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius above average. So I think about that, and I think about the progression of the MJO, and what I'm really thinking about is what let go. And what let go were the really strong easterly wind bursts and the westerly wind bursts. And now the MJO's got this slant to it. See it? Now, normally when we see that kind of slant, just to switch hemispheres, this is going to be bringing suppression back over South America. And if you look, phases 3, 4, and 5, if we progress through them, are drier in the center east part of Brazil. And that's helping, I think, with some of the near-term forecasts. Now let me get to that near-term forecast in a second. First thing I want to show you is yesterday. On satellite, that's a lot of cloud cover in Brazil. This is the rain we were watching move into this area. In fact, you can see it here. Let's refresh this here, so hopefully it'll play for us. There you go. This is all the heavy rain over the last week in southern Brazil. But watch the tail end of this animation. It's coming into the weekend right about now. Watch right here. Look at all that. That was the rain that was pretty well forecast by the models. And now we want to know, is it done? And some of the newest forecast data suggests that the answer to that is yes. And we go right back to where we were. So this is a 5-day sliding window of average precipitation anomalies. I think the key thing that I want you all to notice here is that the drier conditions are mainly anchored on this arrow. But what has changed is the models have pushed the wetter conditions farther north into Sao Paulo, into Goiás, through Mato Grosso do Sul. That just leaves Mato Grosso, northern Goiás, Minas Gerais, Bahia, and Tocantins, this area up here, under the drier conditions. So that's day 5 through 10, and then day 10 through 15, it still kind of lives in that same vicinity. I will make a case that the biggest source of yield variability this year is going to come from southern Brazil flooding. That is something to be watching carefully. But as it stands, it shows that the pattern is going to reflect drier conditions moving back north again, and I think that's going to have another kind of potentially problematic signal for the soybeans there. The temperatures right now are not forecast to be scorching once again as they were recently, but they're going to go back over warmer than average day 10 through 15. So those are the things I'm watching this morning. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Have a good one. Thanks.